Welcome, chosen ones. When you dance with shadows, be prepared to meet the one who owns the night. Chosen ones, let's set the stage. Every generation has people who think they can outsmart divine order. Schemers who treat dark rituals like chess pieces. Karmic couples who believe manipulation is a love language, and practitioners who swear candles and chants can bend the laws of God. But here's the twist. They never calculate. The moment they touched you, they weren't playing with spells anymore. They were signing contracts with their own downfall. And science backs this up in ways they'd never admit. Studies in psychology show that people who engage in constant manipulation or harmful rituals often end up victims of their own tactics, like a boomerang effect of stress, paranoia, and collapse. But you walk untouched, not because you dodged the attack, but because the attack was never built for someone of your frequency. See, the karmic couple and their practitioner thought they were dealing with just another human. They didn't know you were the angel of death to deception itself, not the kind that comes with wings and sides, but the kind that walks quietly into a room and makes corruption start choking on its own lies. And the funniest part, they thought the death angel would arrive with thunder and drama. Meanwhile, you just kept living, laughing, and minding your business while their whole house of cards collapsed. So buckle in, because what they've just learned the hard way is this: you don't play with chosen ones, and you definitely don't call war on someone who was born as the verdict. Number one, they summoned darkness, but it answered back with you. They thought they could summon darkness and direct it like a trained animal, but the very moment they unleashed it, it turned against them. This is the part people don't talk about. Dark energy doesn't stay loyal to its sender. It always demands payment. The karmic couple believed they were clever, pulling strings behind the scenes, instructing their practitioner to send shadows your way. But they didn't realize that by targeting you, they weren't opening a door to your destruction. They were unlocking the side of you that dismantles everything built on lies. What they called down wasn't just darkness. It was judgment. When chosen ones are attacked, something unusual happens. The attack doesn't simply bounce off. It gets reconfigured. It's like an automatic redirection system built into your spirit. What was meant to chain you becomes a chain dragging them. They assumed you were powerless. Someone vulnerable they could manipulate with spells, gossip, or intimidation. They didn't know that chosen ones carry an authority that even shadows recognize. And when those shadows were sent, they didn't find weakness. They found the angel of death to deception itself. The irony is brutal. They thought they were orchestrating your ending. Instead, they scripted their own. The curses, the rituals, the plots, they became like alarms ringing against themselves. And this is the hard truth. Darkness doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about the sender's intentions, whether they thought they were in control, whether they thought the practitioner had sealed the deal. Once it's unleashed, it seeks out the weakest vessel to consume. And because you weren't that vessel, it circled back to them. That's why their downfall feels so sudden, so confusing even to them. They can't understand why their health is failing, why their finances are draining, why relationships are breaking apart. They'll say it's bad luck or stress, but you know what it really is. The darkness they tried to weaponize found its home address. They wanted you destroyed, but all they managed to do was invite judgment into their own living room. And here's where the lesson cuts deepest. They summoned darkness thinking it would obey, but it answered back with you. And that's a price they never thought they'd have to pay. Number two, their practitioner didn't see that you were the unseen practitioner. They leaned on their practitioner as if this person was their ultimate shield, their secret weapon, the one who could twist fate in their favor. What they didn't see was that while the practitioner was busy burning candles, chanting words, and calling on forces, you were already operating at a higher frequency that required no props, no rituals, no middlemen. They underestimated you because you didn't look like someone with spiritual power. You weren't standing over an altar or waving incense around. But what they missed is that your very life is an altar. Your energy itself is a command. This is the part that unravels them the most. While they were trying to construct power artificially, you were born with it naturally. You didn't need to call on spirits because you carry a covenant that is older and stronger than any practitioner could ever touch. That practitioner may have memorized spells, studied shadows, and learned how to manipulate energies, but they were still functioning in a system that requires tools and transactions. You, on the other hand, are the system. You are the direct channel. Your authority doesn't come from what you've learned, but from what you are. The karmic couple thought their practitioner could override you. They thought power was about who could conjure more, pay more, or perform more rituals. But what they found out the hard way is that no one can outmaneuver divine design. You didn't block them because you were stronger at their game. You didn't need to play at all. They didn't realize that while they were setting things up in the dark, your light had already invalidated every move before it even started. It's like trying to write over a document that's password protected. They never had access, no matter how much effort they put in. This is why the practitioner failed, and it shook the karmic couple to the core. The forces they trusted collapsed because your existence doesn't just cancel spells. It exposes the limits of their entire belief system. They discovered that practitioners need tools, while chosen ones are the tool of higher law. That's not a battle anyone can win. And so, they didn't just lose against you. They learned that they were never in the same league as you to begin with. Number 3, they mistook you for prey, not knowing you were the hunter in disguise. They circled you like scavengers, convinced they had found someone easy to feed on. To them, you looked like the perfect prey. Quiet, isolated, misunderstood, and without the kind of backup they believed mattered. They misread your silence as weakness and your endurance as helplessness. What they failed to realize is that chosen ones are masters at disguising strength. You never walk into a battlefield showing your full hand. You let them assume you're vulnerable because that assumption exposes their arrogance. And it was in that arrogance that they made their greatest mistake. Predators don't expect their prey to fight back, much less to flip the entire hunt on its head. The karmic couple thought they were playing with someone fragile, someone who would crack under pressure or run from conflict. But the chosen walk differently. You're not desperate to prove yourself. You let the game play out because you already know the ending. By the time they thought they had you cornered, the tables had already turned, and they couldn't even see how it happened. This is what makes them crumble. The realization that the one they underestimated was studying them the entire time. While they were plotting, you were observing. While they were attacking, you were calculating. While they were celebrating small wins, you were letting them dig their own grave deeper. They didn't know you had the patience of a hunter in disguise. You let them reveal every trick, every weakness, every mask they wore until they had no defense left when judgment finally arrived. And here's the brutal truth. Predators can only win when their target plays the role of victim. You refused to audition for that role. Instead of breaking, you stayed calm. Instead of reacting, you stayed grounded. That calmness drove them mad because it showed them they were never in control. In the end, it wasn't their curses, lies, or plots that destroyed you. It was their inability to recognize who they were up against. They thought they found easy prey, but what they were really staring at was the hunter dressed in innocence. And by the time they realized it, the hunt was already over. And they were Theans bleeding out. Number 4, they found out too late that you don't block spells, you reverse them. They didn't know that your power doesn't lie in building walls, but in becoming a mirror. Most people, when attacked spiritually, scramble to protect themselves, to throw up defenses, to block what's coming. But chosen ones operate differently. You don't waste energy fighting what was never designed to defeat you. Instead, you allow the energy to complete its journey because you know it will never settle in you. You're too aligned, too sealed, too protected by divine order. And so when it hits you, it doesn't find a place to root itself. It ricochets, it returns, and it doesn't just go back in the same form. It multiplies. This is why their lives begin to unravel faster than they can explain. The curse that was meant to tie you down ends up binding them. The sickness they wanted for you clings to their own bodies. The failure they whispered over your name rises like smoke in their own homes. They don't see it at first, but slowly the pattern becomes undeniable. Every dart they sent out returns sharper, heavier, and more merciless than before. And this reversal isn't just punishment, it's revelation. It shows them, and everyone watching, who really holds the authority. If you had still had power, that maybe they were still in control. But by reversing it, you strip away the illusion. They have to face the undeniable reality that they created their own destruction with their own hands. That truth eats at them more than the curses themselves. The real terror for them is discovering that they were never fighting you at all. They were wrestling with their own shadows, their own malice, their own twisted intentions. You were simply the mirror that refused to hold their reflection. And now, what they once sent in secret has come home louder and stronger, demanding payment. This is why chosen ones don't chase revenge. You don't have to. The laws are already written in your favor. You know that every curse is just a boomerang waiting for the right moment. And when it comes back, it doesn't just sting. It devours. That's the hard lesson they learned. You don't block spells. You transform them. And their own darkness is now eating them alive. Number 5, they forgot that death isn't always physical. They were so fixated on the idea of physical harm that they completely missed the other ways death shows up. To them, destruction meant sickness, accidents, or some dramatic ending. But the angel of death doesn't always arrive with a coffin. It comes in silence, stripping away everything that gave them a sense of life while leaving their body intact. That's the kind of death that torments the soul, because it's not over in a single moment. It drags out day after day, piece by piece, until they barely recognize themselves. This is exactly what happened to the karmic couple. They thought they could intimidate you with threats, but they didn't realize that fear has no hold on you. What they ended up summoning was a slower, deeper collapse, the kind that money can't fix and apologies can't reverse. Their dreams began to dry up. Opportunities that once flowed suddenly stopped, and the very doors they forced open slammed shut. Instead of tasting victory, they found themselves choking on disappointment, confusion, and loss they couldn't explain. Finances began to slip through their fingers like sand, no matter how hard they tried to hold on. Friendships turned into betrayals, allies became enemies, and even the people who once applauded them started walking away. Reputation, the thing they valued most, crumbled in front of them. People stopped believing their lies, and the masks they wore started falling off in public. That's a death more brutal than the physical because it doesn't just end one life. It erases the identity they worked so hard to maintain. And here's the irony. They wanted you destroyed so badly, but you're still standing, still breathing, still rising. Meanwhile, they are the ones who feel like ghosts in their own lives. The angel of death they tried to send toward you never touched your body, but it touched every part of their existence. And what's left behind is emptiness. A hollow life with no real joy, no real security, no real future. That's the lesson they didn't see coming. Death isn't always about burying a body. Sometimes it's about burying everything a person thought kept them alive. And that's exactly what swallowed them whole. Number 6, their practitioner didn't anticipate divine jurisdiction. They thought secrecy was protection. In their minds, what happened in those dimly lit rooms stayed there, hidden away from eyes that could judge. The practitioner assured them that as long as the rituals were performed with precision, no one would ever know. But that's the flaw in their thinking. Darkness isn't exempt from oversight. Every action carries weight in the unseen world, and every move outside of divine law gets recorded. While they believed they were conducting private business, what they were really doing was piling up evidence against themselves in a courtroom they couldn't see. This is the part that unsettles them the most. They thought they were the ones holding you hostage in their schemes. But in reality, you were the witness heaven had appointed all along. Every curse they sent, every chant spoken, every malicious thought directed your way became another page in a growing case file. To them, it was a strategy to hire law. It was criminal activity waiting for judgment. And when divine jurisdiction steps in, there's no practitioner skilled enough, no ritual strong enough, no offering large enough to delay the sentence. The karmic couple and their practitioner assumed they had unlimited time to play these games. They didn't realize every ritual comes with an expiration date. The moment heaven decides enough, and when that moment comes, everything they invested collapses instantly. The protection they thought they purchased through spells was never protection at all. It was a ticking clock counting down to their exposure. That's why their downfall feels so exact, so precise, as if the universe was waiting for the perfect time to strike. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't bad luck. It was jurisdiction. It was the enforcement of higher law, reminding them that no one operates above accountability. They built their attacks in secrecy. But the truth is, they were never hidden. And here's the irony. They thought you were the one being judged. In their eyes, the rituals were supposed to prove your weakness, your unworthiness. But what really happened was the opposite. By targeting you, they dragged themselves into trial. And every move they made became evidence of guilt. They didn't anticipate divine jurisdiction. They forgot the universe doesn't just watch, it keeps receipts. Number 7. They tried to weaponize secrets, but you were born with X-ray vision. They relied on secrecy as their strongest weapon. In their minds, as long as no one knew the details, as long as their plans stayed in hushed whispers and coded glances, they were untouchable. But what they never understood is that chosen ones don't need to overhear conversations or catch people in the act. You were born with sight that goes beyond the physical. Your intuition doesn't just guess. It confirms. It doesn't need proof, because it operates on a level where truth can't hide. Every alliance they formed in the dark, every secret conversation dripping with malice, every false smile, they were all registered in your spirit before they ever reached your ears. That's why you never seem surprised. You didn't confront them with frantic energy. You didn't chase down answers, and you didn't beg for explanations. You already knew. Your calmness wasn't ignorance. It was mastery, and that silence unnerved them more than anything else, because they couldn't figure out how you kept seeing through walls they thought were impenetrable. The truth is, chosen ones live with an inner radar that never shuts off. It scans motives, intentions, and energies with precision that human lies cannot distort. They thought they were clever, disguising betrayal as loyalty and gossip as concern. But when you looked at them, your spirit already stripped the mask away. That's why they grew paranoid in your presence. Because even when you said nothing, they felt exposed. And here's what really broke them. They thought secrets gave them power. They didn't realize their very attempt to hide only highlighted the darkness in them more clearly to you. In their secrecy, they revealed themselves without even knowing it. Every whisper became louder in your spirit. Every shadow they tried to hide behind only made them more visible in your vision. This is why chosen ones can't be outmaneuvered by conspiracies. Concealment is powerless in your presence. You don't need evidence to validate what your spirit already knows. That's the curse of those who try to weaponize secrets against you. They always end up exposing themselves. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late. You saw through them before they even made their move. Number 8, they thought Angel of Death meant you would kill them. It meant their masks would. They misunderstood the title entirely. When they heard Angel of Death, their minds jumped to the most literal meaning. They expected sudden endings, dramatic punishments, maybe even a physical demise. What they never anticipated was the kind of death that cuts deeper than the body, the death of pretense. You didn't need to lay a hand on them because their own masks did the work. They had built their lives on carefully crafted performances, playing the role of the victim, the savior, the loyal partner, the trustworthy friend. But the moment your presence entered the picture, every layer of disguise started to peel away. The irony is, you never forced exposure. You simply stood as you are, authentic, unshaken, aligned, and that light became unbearable for them. Their lies couldn't coexist with your truth. Their manipulations couldn't breathe in the atmosphere you carried. What suffocated them wasn't your anger, but the suffocating weight of being seen clearly for the first time. People who live in illusions can't handle mirrors. And that's exactly what you are. The karmic couple tried to paint you as the problem, hoping to maintain their roles in the story they created. But masks are fragile when tested against reality. The cracks began to show in public arguments, in friendships falling apart, in their inability to keep their stories consistent. Every time they tried to cover one lie, another one slipped out. Every time they tried to control perception, their real selves pushed through. It was like watching someone choke on their own disguise. And this is the part that stings the most for them. Your wrath wasn't needed. Your silence wasn't even needed. The reflection itself was enough to dismantle them, because being chosen means you embody a frequency where facades cannot thrive. You don't even have to point out the truth. Your presence makes it unavoidable. And when the world started seeing them as escape, they thought angel of death meant you'd bring destruction from the outside. What really happened was much worse for them. Their masks turned into news, and their own deception became the weapon that ended them. That's the death they never prepared for, the death of their illusion. Number 9, they believed power was in spells, not realizing power was in innocence. They were convinced that power came from how elaborate their rituals were, how much money they paid their practitioner, or how many nights they stayed up chanting incantations. To them, control meant manipulation, and manipulation meant strength. But what shattered them was realizing that all their efforts couldn't touch you, because real power doesn't come from trying to bend the universe. It comes from being in alignment with it, and nothing aligns more perfectly than innocence. They underestimated how dangerous purity is to corruption. A clean soul carries a frequency that cancels out anything rooted in deceit, envy, or malice. You didn't have to do anything extra. You didn't need a ritual, a spell, or a protection charm. Just by existing as you are, you disrupted everything they tried to build in the dark. That's the part they'll never admit out loud. Their witchcraft collapsed, not because you fought harder, but because your innocence carried a voltage their corruption couldn't withstand. This is why their curse is always boomeranged. Innocence acts like a natural filter. It doesn't absorb poison, it rejects it. When they sent malice your way, it couldn't land. It had to return home, and it returned stronger than when it left. They thought witchcraft was destructive, but what they found out the hard way is that innocence is lethal in silence. It dismantles without confrontation. It exposes without effort. It destroys without lifting a hand. What truly crushed them was the realization that their sacrifices and spells made them weaker, not stronger. Every attempt drained them spiritually and materially. While you continued to grow without needing any of it, they had to buy their power. You were born with yours. They had to keep feeding theirs. You only had to keep living. And that truth humiliated them more than their failures, because it proved that everything they worshipped was counterfeit compared to the raw force of a pure soul. The hardest pill for them to swallow is that innocence isn't passivity. It's not weakness. It's the most volatile weapon against corruption. You showed them that while spells fade, rituals expire, and practitioners fail, innocence remains untouchable. And in the end, it was the very thing that burned their empire to the ground. Number 10, they found out that time isn't on their side. They assumed time was their ally. The karmic couple and their practitioner believed that if they kept pressing, kept chipping away at you, eventually you'd collapse. They thought destruction worked like erosion, slow, steady, and inevitable. But what they didn't realize is that chosen ones don't operate on ordinary timelines. You move according to divine timing, and divine timing never bends to anyone's schemes. The very clock they thought would wear you down ended up fast-tracking their own collapse. Here's the irony. While they were plotting in seasons, heaven was moving in moments. They expected to see you drained month after month, struggling under the weight of what they'd sent. Instead, their own foundation started to decay at a pace they couldn't control. Businesses they built over years lost value overnight. Relationships they nurtured for decades unraveled in days. Stability they thought would last a lifetime fell apart in weeks. The time they thought belonged to them suddenly became a weapon against them. This is what happens when you fight against someone who walks in alignment. Delay doesn't mean denial. It means preparation. While they thought time was softening you up for defeat, it was actually sharpening you for victory. Every day they counted as a win was really a countdown to their exposure. And when that moment hit, it wasn't gradual. It was immediate. They didn't even have the chance to recover because judgment doesn't give extensions. What makes this so hard for them to accept is how quickly everything turned. They thought karma was something distant, something they could outrun, something they could pay their way out of. But divine law doesn't move on human schedules. Once the clock struck, everything they had invested in became dust, leaving them with nothing to show but regret. And here's the truth. They can't escape. Chosen ones don't just survive time. They redeem it. You gain strength as the days pass, while your enemies lose it. They thought you'd grow weaker by the year, but instead you became more unshakable. Meanwhile, their lives accelerated in the opposite direction, collapsing faster than they ever thought possible. That's how they found out painfully, and suddenly, that time was never on their side. Number 11, they miscalculated fear. You don't have any. Fear was their favorite weapon. They counted on it to do the heavy lifting for them. The karmic couple believed that if they could make you flinch, if they could make you doubt yourself, then half their battle would already be won. Fear was supposed to freeze you in place, to make you second guesses every step, to weaken your spirit before they even touched you. But they didn't know you were built differently. Fear doesn't live in you. Not because you're reckless, but because you understand something they don't. Fear has no authority over someone who already knows their outcome. This is where they miscalculated completely. They set traps waiting for the moment you would panic. But instead of crumbling, you kept moving. Instead of questioning yourself, you stayed steady. You walked through setups, lies, and manipulations without hesitation. And that terrified them. Because nothing unravels an enemy faster than realizing their most powerful weapon doesn't work. It wasn't just that you refused to fear them. It was that you seemed incapable of it. And that broke them in ways no curse ever could. Your calmness became their nightmare. They expected you to scream, to react, to run. Instead, you watched. You observed. You let them reveal themselves. And you never gave them the satisfaction of seeing you shaken. That silence echoed louder than any confrontation. They began to question their own power, their own spells, their own control. If fear couldn't touch you, then what could? That question gnawed at them until their confidence crumbled. And this is the part they'll never admit. Your lack of fear exposed their own. Because underneath all the bravado, they were terrified that you'd figure out who you really are. And you did. They were terrified that their curses would circle back. And they did. They were terrified that you'd keep rising despite them, and you did. In the end, it wasn't your wrath that destroyed them. It was your steady refusal to tremble. The angel of death doesn't panic, doesn't flinch, doesn't run. It watches. And when you kept walking through every trap unfazed, it shattered their psyche. They thought fear would paralyze you, but instead it paralyzed them. Number 12. Their rituals couldn't calculate the variable called destiny. Every ritual they performed, every spell they cast, every chant they repeated, they thought it could alter the outcome, bend reality, or put you in a box they could control. But what they failed to understand is that destiny is not negotiable. It doesn't respond to fear, bribery, or manipulation. Chosen ones are born with a blueprint written beyond human comprehension, and no amount of dark work can rewrite it. The karmic couple and their practitioner thought they were engineering a path to your defeat. But in truth, they were clashing with forces already set in motion long before they ever appeared. Every incantation failed, not because it was weak, but because it was irrelevant. You weren't merely resistant. You were untouchable in ways that could never be measured by their knowledge of rituals. They treated your life like a blank page, assuming they could fill it with chaos. But the page was already filled with destiny, a design they couldn't see, let alone disrupt. Their schemes bounced off because the universe doesn't work in their favor. It works according to its own order. And you are part of that order. The most devastating part for them is realizing that they weren't even fighting a person. They were fighting prophecy. Every curse, every secret plot, every manipulation. They all collided with a reality that had already been written. And that reality included your victory. They thought power was in their rituals. But power doesn't come from what they can summon. It comes from what is guaranteed by divine law. You were pre-insured, protected by something far beyond their understanding, far beyond their control. And that's why their frustration became unbearable. The more effort they poured into their attacks, the faster their schemes failed. They couldn't account for timing, alignment, or the unseen forces that move in accordance with destiny. What they called coincidence was actually the precise unfolding of prophecy, and what they called setbacks were the universe correcting itself in real time. In the end, every ritual they attempted only highlighted the futility of their struggle. They weren't just losing. They were reminded over and over that destiny cannot be bargained with, rewritten, or broken. They found out the hard way that chosen ones don't just survive. They were meant to rise, and prophecy always wins. Number 13, they tried to play God but met the God in you. They thought they could control your life, bend it to their will, and manipulate outcomes like a game they were destined to win. They believed their status, their charms, strategies gave them authority over you. But they didn't realize that power doesn't come from titles or influence. It comes from alignment with divine truth. By trying to play God, they stepped into a realm they could never dominate. What they encountered wasn't a human to control. It was the reflection of God through your existence. Everything they thought gave them strength became meaningless the moment they faced you. Their rituals, their whispers, their manipulations, they carried weight only in the human realm. But you exist beyond it. They assumed they could force outcomes. But divine power doesn't respond to coercion, threats, or intimidation. They tried to push, to pull, to orchestrate events to suit their narrative. But the universe had already positioned you in a place they couldn't reach. A position where their interference was powerless. The karmic couple and their practitioner experienced something terrifying. The recognition that what they were facing wasn't vengeance, not even strategy. It was authority incarnate. Every scheme they had built collapsed under the weight of a power they could not touch, a presence they could not influence. Their every calculation failed because they were trying to move against something infinitely larger than themselves, something that operates beyond fear, desire, or malice. And here's the harshest reality for them. They weren't simply losing control. They were being confronted with a force that exposes weakness. Their networks, their plots, their supposed superiority, all of it crumbled because it relied on human limitations. And you are not limited. They couldn't corrupt you, intimidate you, or stop you because the God in you is the ultimate judge, the ultimate protector, and the ultimate authority. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. They had misread the battlefield completely. They thought they were fighting a person. They didn't see that they were facing destiny, divine alignment, and the embodiment of power that no human effort could ever suppress. And in that realization, they discovered the most devastating truth. You didn't just survive. They were powerless against the God in you. Number 14. They finally realized the angel of death doesn't announce its arrival. They were waiting for a show. In their minds, the angel of death would arrive with chaos, with confrontation, with loud, unmistakable signs of retribution. They imagined dramatic moments, sharp words, sudden accidents, proof that their target was finally being touched by consequences. What they didn't realize is that this isn't how the angel of death works. It doesn't knock or shout. It moves quietly, invisibly, like a shadow settling over a room. The impact is real, but it's subtle at first, and that subtlety is what makes it terrifying. Suddenly, relationships they depended on started to fracture. Friends turned distant. Allies disappeared, and the alliances they once counted on proved fragile. Health issues cropped up unexpectedly. Finances drained without explanation. And the sense of stability they relied on dissolved. It wasn't dramatic. It was silent, creeping, and relentless. Every loss, every misstep, every unraveling thread was a signal they never anticipated. A warning they ignored until it was too late. And the terrifying part for them wasn't just the destruction. It was the realization that it all originated from the presence they had underestimated. You didn't need to attack. You didn't need to confront. You didn't need to send warnings or threats. The world simply shifted around you. And in that shift, their foundations gave way. The karmic couple and their practitioner learned the hard truth. The angel of death doesn't need to make noise. You don't have to see it coming. You just experience the aftermath, and it's total. By the time they understood what was happening, it was too late. They thought power lay in visibility and spectacle, in forcing reactions. But the real force was silent, controlled, and absolute. You don't announce the arrival. You just exist, and the universe obeys. Their collapse was inevitable because they never grasped how influence works at a deeper, unseen level. The lesson they learned in the most devastating way possible is that quiet power is far deadlier than noise. You don't need fireworks, theatrics, or confrontation. You shift the atmosphere and the world around you falls apart, leaving only the truth of who really holds authority. The karmic couple and their practitioner thought they were the hunters, that every ritual, every plot, every whispered secret would corner you, weaken you, and finally break you. They believed their power came from manipulation, fear, and control. But what they discovered the hard way is that real power isn't something you chase. It's something you are. Every attempt they made against you bounced back multiplied or dissolved entirely because they were never fighting a person. They were fighting destiny, prophecy, and a spirit aligned with divine law. Their schemes crumbled, not because of confrontation, but because of your presence, your authenticity, your purity, and the quiet authority you carry. They learned that darkness can never dominate what is aligned with light, that fear has no hold on those born to rise, and that masks cannot survive the reflection of truth. Their time ran out, their secrets betrayed them, and their own shadows became the instruments of their destruction. While they expected chaos and drama, they got silence and inevitability, the slow but unstoppable unraveling of everything they built on lies. You didn't strike. You didn't chase, and you didn't announce your arrival. You simply were, and that was enough to overturn their entire world. This is the reality that leaves them powerless, and the world watching in awe. Chosen ones operate on a different level. The angel of death doesn't need to declare war. It shifts the atmosphere, alters destiny, and exposes corruption without lifting a hand. Every attack they attempted, every ritual they performed, every plan they schemed backfired in ways they could never have calculated. They learned too late that the laws of divine order always prevail, and no amount of cunning, fear, or ritual can overcome a spirit that is aligned, protected, and destined to rise. You stood unshaken while their world collapsed. Not because you fought harder, but because you existed stronger. You didn't just survive. You rewrote the rules of engagement, shattered their illusions, and proved that true power is rooted in alignment, purity, and unwavering presence. And that is the lesson they will carry for the rest of their lives. You don't warn people, you don't tremble, and you don't need permission to exist. You simply shift, and the world bends to your truth. If this video gave you chills, opened your eyes, or shook your perspective, don't let this moment pass. Hit that subscribe button and join the family of chosen ones who are learning the truth and stepping into their power. Like this video to show you're ready to rise above deception. Comment below with your thoughts, your experiences, or the revelations that shook you the most. Your voice matters here, and share this with anyone who needs to see how destiny always wins, because the knowledge in this video is too powerful to keep to yourself. Stay aligned, stay unstoppable, and remember your presence alone shifts the world. Don't just watch, participate, and let the world feel your truth. God bless you.